Is there a UFO base off of the Guadalupe Islands under the sea? And is this base the origin of many of the UFO sightings that have been seen in the Pacific area, the Pacific coast? This is what Harvard UAP UFO lawyer Danny Sheehan has recently stated on some major podcast outlets. So, in this video, we're going to listen to his statements and then analyze them with some other information about the idea of undersea bases. So, let's just start here by diving in and hearing what Danny Sheehan had to say on the podcast here that is I forget the name of this, but this big one. Oh, Julian Dory. Yes. Okay, so let's listen.
They deployed an entire carrier group down off
a carrier group.
The Nimitz carrier group. They deployed it down off the Baja to monitor the site down there. There's an underwater base for sure, right off Guadalupe Island, down underneath the sea.
Can we Google Guadalupe Island so we can see that?
Yeah, there's a specific spot.
You said this has to do with the church?
No, what I'm saying is that there are things happening now. There's such rapid developments that are going on now that they now know that there is this location right off Guadalupe Island, between there and Baja.
Where that island right there on the screen.
Which one is Guadalupe?
Well, I see we just lost the screen.
Is Guadalupe Island? Yeah, down to, there's Baja. One of those. It's which one is Guadalupe?
The little thing right there. Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, that would be it.
Got it.
Okay, so is that Guadalupe Island? Yeah, that's the one.
Like
right off that island, right there, beneath the sea. They deployed the entire the Nimitz carrier.
That's David Fravers.
Yep.
Right.
And they monitored over 100 sightings of UFOs coming and going down into the ocean right there and going down to the bottom of the ocean. And they were monitored by the submarines. That's right. Monitored by the submarines underneath the water, coming and going, so that there's virtually certainly a base there.
Okay. So as you heard him say, virtually certain that there's a base there. So the first question that I ask is this base where UFOs are apparently coming and going, is it necessarily an alien base, non-human intelligence, or could it be a top secret human secret military base? Well, it just so happens that there's a lot of compelling information that goes back many decades about the details of constructing, as he said there, undersea bases, specifically off the coasts of land masses like islands, and even in the middle of the ocean, not connected to any land. And we're going to look at it now, the documentary evidence that makes a compelling case that such sites could have been constructed and exist today, with undersea facilities that could even be responsible for UFOs coming and going, but they don't necessarily need to be from aliens. They could be from secret military operations. So let's take a look at what we got here.
They deployed an entire.
All right. So when we think about out there in the Pacific coast, right, and we think about the UFO sightings, of course, we naturally think of the Tic Tac sighting, the infamous 2004 Nimitz sighting. Commander David Fravor, who testified under oath last year in Congress. This is the big sighting that made the New York Times article in 2017, and of course, brought the whole modern UFO UAP transparency interest into the government and the larger public. Now, this Tic Tac UFO, if we look at what Commander Fravor said under oath to Congress, he said that the characteristics of this UFO, as you see in the picture there, that they said looked like a tic tac shaped, said he defied the laws of known physics. Okay. And, you know, the assumption that most people jump to there is that, oh, that means that it couldn't have been built by humans. All right. But we know that there are many claims, and even in the most recent information published by Michael Schellenberger and the Immaculate Constellation alleged UFO program, which supposedly the hearing next week is going to be trying to highlight and go into. Even there, this whistleblower mentioned alien reproduction vehicles, which implies that humans have attempted to make these UFOs. Okay. And then you have two instances of claims that the Tic Tac is a human experimental UFO project, a secret, classified deep black budget special access program. And the claim comes from the Disclosure Project, and also in from Michael Schratt, who's kind of part of the Disclosure Project organization, but also kind of does his own thing. Anyway, the claim is that Lockheed Martin developed these Tic Tac UFOs, and that it may even go back as far to 1967. Okay, here's from Michael Schratt's website, and this is an illustration that he made of what a witness reported seeing in 1967. And, his argument is that when you see the different seams and the rivets that were reported in these like tentacle type of apparatus on it, that these are indications not of, like a super advanced possible alien spacecraft, which many reports describe as being like having no seams, no rivets, nothing. It's just like a perfectly smooth outside structure, which like baffles them. So Schratt's argument is that when witnesses report seeing things like that, like bolts and rivets and seams and those kind of tentacle apparatus, in his argument, that indicates that it's a human built experimental anti-gravity craft. So this goes back to 1967. And then there's another technical drawing that he did based on the witness report. And the riveted seams and so forth, electrical probes. Okay. So go forward a little bit. There's another witness in the Disclosure Project who said that in 1991, they were at somewhere in the Azores Islands at some type of facility or another. And that they witnessed, as you can see in the reproduced illustration here of the testimony, they saw this tic tac shaped craft being loaded out of a big aircraft. Okay, now again, we have no way of knowing if this witness really saw this and if he's telling the truth, but it's a data point. It's a data point. And of course, if this has been successfully covered up, that tic tac craft or an alien reproduction vehicle or some type of human anti-gravity project, you would only have maybe these couple of people claiming to have seen it that we can never verify. But anyway, we have those data points. And so we've now kind of gone over the Nimitz, the Tic Tac sighting. Clearly there's this concentration on the USOs, and like Danny Sheehan said, UFOs supposedly coming in and out of the water, being observed by submarines, and this idea that, like he says, that whoever he's connected with knows that it's basically certain that there are undersea bases for these UFOs. Okay. And so this leads to the question of, could there be top secret undersea UFO bases? And this leads us into some very interesting information. So we're going to be going through some information here that's documented in some very compelling government files, thanks to the amazing work by Richard Sauter, who was a UFO researcher, PhD. He wrote a book called Underground Bases. Then he wrote another book called Underwater and Underground Bases. And back in the late 90s or early 2000s, it's kind of interesting that he's kind of faded into obscurity, but the work that he did is just fascinating because he actually went to archives. He actually did Freedom of Information Act requests about all of these government documents about making these underground, and as we'll see in this video here, even undersea bases. And they had it all figured out according to the documents. We're talking like basically 60 years ago and more, actually, based on what the government documents say. So let's get into this here. Okay. And here's from his book summarizing it. He's basically saying that there's been a lot of information that was shared with him about these underground facilities, and that there may be undersea naval facilities. As he says here, a former associate of mine who had been in the Navy told me that there are tunnels on both coasts of the United States that submarines enter when they are at sea and then travel through to secret underground submarine bases that are inland from the coast. I've been told time and again about purported submarine tunnels in the Long Beach, California area that allegedly bore inland from the ocean. So that's pretty interesting there. And of course, it's always interesting to hear what people hear through the grapevine. But now we're going to look at the actual documents that go back to 1966. So this is the undersea base paper trail. The source here is a letter from the research director of the Explosives Research Center from the United States Department of the Interior, from the U.S. To actually the technical director of research and development at the U.S. Naval Ordnance Test Station in China Lake, California. China Lake is this very mysterious, top secret facility that is believed to have a large underground facilities. And this is almost seen as like the Area 51 of the Navy. China Lake, you can read up more into that. Not as widely talked about, but definitely mentioned in the UFO literature and even in the official literature. I mean, you can do your own research into China Lake. In any event, that's where this document is coming from, is research that they were doing in China Lake, and the Naval Ordnance Test Center would have been like the cutting edge of facilities of this nature. Okay, so 1966, and it says, quote, in talking with some of our mining experts, I find a consensus that sinking a shaft to 10,000 feet and driving a shaft horizontally from this presents no severe problems other than perhaps money if the rock is competent and not faulted. He's talking about driving a shaft horizontally into the ocean bed. Okay, so this is kind of like the first thing I think about when I hear Danny Sheehan talking about this base being right off the coast. Okay, because you see, basically, and you can read, I have all the locations here if you're curious to look into this yourself from the book, and the Kindle locations there, as I have the Kindle version. So basically, as you can see, kind of in these illustrations here, basically the idea is, as you can see in this one, is you would go on the coast, and this is what they were outlining here. You would go on the coast, right, and you can drill the shaft down past where the sea level floor would be, right, on the coast. So basically, you drill down far enough on the coast where you're under the seabed, and then you can drill out from the coast, drill tunnels. As long as the seabed rock is the right type of rock that could hold the facilities and the pressure and so forth, you could just drill out from the coast and create bases. You could create undersea tunnels connecting bases. it makes sense, right? And here in 1966, they were saying that there's no problem with building these. The only barrier was money, which solder sites later would really not have even been that expensive. And so here we have another, or the same source rather. Actually, let me check this out. No, this is another source from 1966. And this is from a study that was then done at the Navy Ordnance Test Center at China Lake in 1966. And here's the conclusions. Quote, land-based undersea installations are not only practical today, but are not overly expensive. The depth of shaft needed for a land-based installation will depend on the depth needed to reach either the competent rock horizon beneath the sea floor or else a desired depth from a construction point of view. That's what I was just saying. Like, you just drill down far enough into the land to be underneath the seafloor, and then you can drill out, have your tunnel, create your bases, your submarine lock system, whatever you want there. All right. He goes on to say, quote, for long-distance undersea tunneling, boring is especially attractive. With modern-day shaft and tunnel boring techniques, access to the seafloor from land can be carried out at depths beneath the sea of several thousand feet to at least 10,000 to 12,000 feet and to distances offshore of tens to hundreds of miles. So this is actually just crazy here. Because in 1966, the leading research and development organization at China Lake of the U.S. Navy for a type of project like this is saying that with modern day techniques in 1966, they could drill down 10,000 to 12,000 feet beneath the sea and then could go out off the shore, off the coast, like Danny Sheehan was saying about the Guadalupe Island, tens to hundreds of miles. That's crazy. And this is straight from this document right here, from the Navy in 1966. By the way, good luck trying to get a Freedom of Information Act to see this document for yourself, because Richard Sauder lists all of the sources where he's getting and quoting the information from, as we all should do. And it's just nothing short of fascinating. But there it is for you. It's got the number, the document, everything right there, the date. You can go check it yourself. And he even prints pages of it in the book, right? But good luck getting it, because I put in a Freedom of Information Act request for another one of these documents in another one of Richard Sauder's books, where he's talking about underground bases in an area that I'm interested in. That's in, not close to where I live, but relatively. And I put in a Freedom of Information Act request about what was supposed to be like literally plans to build these in the same time period, like the 60s, the 70s. And it's been basically like a year now, and they still have not given me the report. And that's through the Department of Energy, and they just keep saying that they're having technical difficulties. So, there's the report right there, and we're going to see there's so much more from this. That's pretty shocking to read, I'm not going to lie. But good luck getting those documents to see for yourself through the Freedom of Information Act. All right, so obviously, seeing here their plans in 1966 to build these bases off of the coasts, we look at where Guadalupe Island is, and we see that that's certainly something that would be feasible to do. You can see here, it'd be nice area conducive to doing that. All right, and yes, Guadalupe Island down in Mexico, but look at the other island that has been infamous and being reported connected to UFO, UAP sightings, and that's Catalina Island. And you've heard like Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet talk about an anomaly off the Catalina coast that they have observed. You've heard people like him and his caliber and others say that there's some type of anomaly off the coast of the Catalina Island, and there's a lot of UFO activity there. You even seen like the Discovery UK channel go there and like try to see if they could see something, and they observed some strange magnetic anomalies. So I mean, look at the documents we're reading from 1966. It's like, is it, we're going to jump to the conclusion that it's an alien base without first, looking at these 1966 documents and saying, did they maybe follow through on some of these plans and build top secret bases there that they then began using perhaps for experimental, craft, anti-gravity craft, whatever. I mean, it's right there near Long Beach and this whole area where we know there are all of these aerospace, all the ones that have been implicated, for example, all the ones that Lou Elizondo has claimed are behind covering up the crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, Lockheed, Skunkworks, Boeing, all of them, they all have sites right on the coast here. Now, so this is just like an idea of that I get from reading the information, like a hypothesis. What if we just read right in the 1966 Navy document that they could drill out from the coast and go out tens or hundreds of miles. Now, I don't know how far Catalina Island is from the coast. It may be more than that, but also that was in 1966 for state-of-the-art technology then. So, I'm just saying here as like a creative hypothesis, what if, they go straight from these underground production and experimental facilities at these aerospace sites on the West Coast, and what if they go out right underwater, and link up with these Catalina Island anomaly, which many are claiming is some type of undersea UFO base. I mean, it might all be connected more than just jumping to the conclusion that, it's an alien base. But we'll get back to that later. Let's return because there's a lot more here. There's actually just more and more compelling information from this document about what could be going on. And, he points out some examples here that I have highlighted, the Saycon Tunnel, Ripple Rock, San Diego Ocean Outfall, Boston Harbor projects, which you can read up on all of those in the book. And they're basically like, he's basically using those to say like, look, these projects were done. Like, it's not just theoretically feasible to make undersea facilities by drilling on the coast and then going out under the seabed. He's using these to say, look, that they already made them. Okay. We know about these ones. And as he says here, tunneling under the sea is state of the art for the mining and tunneling industries. It has been done for a very long time now and continues to the present day. Right. And, major construction and tunneling projects under the sea bottom exist. So we have to understand that that's just a reality, right? Going back many decades. Some more information here, a different source, the U.S. Navy Underwater Construction Teams. The source here is a U.S. Naval Facilities Engineering Command document from 1998. And the quoted information is, quote, there is a unit of specially trained personnel within the U.S. Navy that carries out underwater construction projects all over the world and whose members have secret security clearances. So, again, connecting the paper trail to this notion, this hypothesis that there are top secret, just like apparently there are, like hopefully maybe we'll be finding out more about in a week, there are these top secret UFO retrieval versus engineering programs, maybe there are also these undersea base and whatever's going on there programs, perhaps even connected to the UFOs, the USOs we know is a whole thing. So quite interesting, quite interesting. And more information. This is from the Navy's website. The link's right there about the Naval Facilities Engineering Service Center, which mentions, quote, specialized ocean facilities capable of the, quote, design, construction, maintenance, and repair of fixed ocean or underwater facilities from the shoreline to depths of 20,000 feet with a, quote, seafloor engineering division. So, again, just even more information confirming the reality of this. 20,000 feet is deep. Moving along, it's not just the Navy, apparently. Here we have the U.S. Navy, here we have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, a document that goes back to 1967 from the Construction Engineering Research Laboratory. This document discusses, quote, construction of unique military facilities in marine environments and, quote, techniques for rapid evaluation of coastal and inland bottom conditions for construction purposes. Again, more corroboration that all the way back in the late 1960s, they were actively pursuing this concept of utilizing the seabed and the coastal areas to create underground, undersea bases. And thanks to my computer is freezing up right now. Okay, so here we go. All right, so now let's think about. All right, we just discussed the idea of building undersea bases off of the coast, like Danny Sheehan was saying at the beginning of our video here. We've established that in the late 1960s, they already had state-of-the-art technology. It wasn't that expensive. It was all figured out according to the Navy documents and even the Army documents. But that was the idea of it being connected to land through tunneling from the coast. But to do them one better, they also figured out and stated in the documents that it was entirely feasible to build undersea bases in the middle of the ocean, meaning, not connected to any land, just in the middle of the ocean, under the seabed floor. Crazy, right? And imagine being able to do that from a military perspective. Let's think about this for a moment. That would obviously be a huge asset. If you're looking to build up your, and you would want it to be top secret. You would want no one to ever know about it. You could put a big undersea, under the seabed floor base in the middle of the ocean throughout perhaps the world, different locations. I mean, if you could do it and the only thing stopping you is financial, why not? And we know that the military has had billions and billions and billions of dollars of untraceable funds spent that were never accounted for over the decades, especially in the 1980s, but going all the way back to the late 1940s. And these dates we're going to have to think about, as some of these documents reveal some pretty perplexing information. So let's move forward to this idea of building bases in the middle of the ocean. And this is outlined in the documentation as the rock site concept. Our source here, again, is China Lake U.S. Naval Ordnance Test Station, October 1966. This is a study. In the abstract here, it says, quote, large undersea installations with a shirt sleeve environment have existed under the continental shelves for many decades. Pew. What? Like, I'm so skeptical to even believe this, but it's coming straight from this document, because that's for many decades and it's being written in 1966. Okay, so I don't know what qualifies as many, but I mean, the latest I would be willing to trace that back will be the late 1940s, where we start to see, the National Security Act, we start to see, top secret security classifications after the Manhattan Project and all that. And we also start to see some underground bases actually being built that we know about in the late 1940s, as early as 1947. So are they saying that large undersea installations have existed, on off the shores or under the continental shelves for many decades? I mean, that's just wild there. But moving along here, they go on to say the technology now exists using off-the-shelf petroleum, mining, submarine, and nuclear equipment to establish permanent manned installations within the seafloor that do not have any air umbilical or other connection with the land or water surface, yet maintain a normal 1 atmosphere environment within. So that's pretty crazy. Again, 1966. Moving along, the study says, quote, a rock site installation consists of a room or series of rooms excavated within the bedrock beneath the seafloor. All right, there it is. And then the researcher Richard Sauter, summarizing, the implication of the document here, says, quote, it would be within the state of the art in the underground construction industry to make mammoth underground chambers in the middle of the ocean, hundreds of feet below the seafloor, that would have no visible connection to either the land or to the surface of the ocean. Again, imagine how much of a strategic advantage this would be if you could build a substantial undersea base in the middle of the ocean and you could never see any connection to the surface or land. I mean, and the only thing stopping you is money. Why would you not do it? And this is where the argument comes up here, and kind of how Sauter frames it in the book is like the reason that that's where the paper trail kind of stops is because, okay, someone like him who went and dug out, I mean, good luck. I don't know how he got these documents because, like I said, I'm waiting a year now for one of the ones that he found. But that document, that paper trail exists where they had figured out the schematics and what it would take and then how much it would cost. And then the paper trail disappears. So and this goes for the same thing with the underground bases, even as crazy as it sounds. And I would like to make a video about this. I have the notes saved on my drive. Even a moon base in 1958, full schematics, the whole plan in 1958. But going back to the undersea bases, the only thing stopping them is the money. And so the argument becomes, okay, does the paper trail stop because they abandoned the idea altogether and said, we're just not going to do it for some reason, even though they had the money? And the leading researchers in the departments that were tasked with studying the feasibility of these construction projects said that, it was feasible and current and modern technology could get it done. The only thing they needed was the money. Or so is it that they just never did it and that's why we never heard about it officially? Or is it that they realized how strategic and how much, in order for it to be so strategic and helpful for the military, it would have to be top secret, and therefore there is no public documentation, for example, that says we have a base in the middle of the ocean under the seabed floor. Okay, so that's for you. I'll let you make your own conclusions on what you think about that there. All right, so moving along here, to the details of, okay, but how would you get into that base? Well, they give us the details in this document here. How would you get to this base that's in the middle of the ocean? And in here it says, quote, direct access into the seafloor bedrock by means of a lock system for passing through the seafloor water interface is a practice now within the technological capability of this nation's industry. 1966. So again, saying to go in like a submarine or something and go down to the seafloor and enter from the water into an underground base under the seafloor is within the technological capability in 1966. And, I was watching a movie a few months ago called Meg 2, and I had already read this book by Richard Sauter. And so when I saw a scene from that, it was quite interesting because it was depicting exactly that. They were out on some mission deep in the ocean, and they actually stumbled upon this entrance to a base that was on the seafloor bed. Um, and unfortunately, I couldn't get the scene because I would have had to rent the movie to show you. I couldn't get the scene where they actually see it, and it's pretty cool to like see it, animated and put graphically in the movie. But I'm just going to show you like 20 seconds of a scene in this lock pressurized system. And by the way, if you're more engineering minded, you can go. I have the you know citation right there. You can in the book. You can go look and read in more depth about what the report said, how this would actually work, and like how you would keep the water from getting into the undersea base. But in this scene here in the movie, there becomes a leak because the shark attacks some of the outside structure and a leak takes place. But anyway, you get kind of an idea here of their depiction of it.
It's you.
Won't you be crushed by the pressure?
All right, so yeah, that's just a little scene from that, but I found that to be quite interesting. And these are pictures from the actual report showing how this lock-based entry system would work. All of the schematics are there. Um, I don't fully understand it. I never had the opportunity to really, um, at a younger age when my brain was developing, to kind of learn like engineering principles. And it's not something I've ever taken the time to study deeper. So I can basically follow along with the concepts, but I'll leave you to look more into that. But they had it figured out there in 1966. And moving along here, they say, quote, drilling from large complex barges has been successfully demonstrated in 11,700 feet of water and is approaching operational reality in very deep waters, such as the 14,000-foot depths contemplated by the MOHO project. So here they're just saying, yes, to make these bases in the middle of the ocean, you would have to go out, create a barge that you could drill from under the seabed floor. And in 1966, they had already done that and was approaching the reality of very deep waters. All right. Should get us thinking about the, um, you know, preponderance of USO sightings that are reported all over. Is it really all non-human intelligence? Is it really all aliens? Or does some of this documentary evidence from 1966 make us pause to consider other possibilities? All right. And here in this section of the document, they're basically saying, quote, any location on the seafloor that consists of consolidated sediment strong enough to stand as an open bore can be entered to yield 1 atmosphere working sites, basically saying all that's needed is to make sure that the bedrock underneath the ocean is the right hardness for, that could make the underground site. And as it says here, quote, a surprising amount of the deep ocean appears to be accessible, competent bedrock. And back to our California coast and all the Nimitz and the UFO activity out there, it says, quote, the continental shelf off the coast of Southern California appears to have some 10 to 15% of its area comprised of bare, hard bedrock. And goes on to say, quote, the rock site installations can be placed at great depth beneath the sea floor. Their openings can be numerous and scattered. and access to the installation is absolutely controlled by the base occupants. In other words, in 1966, they could make undersea bases deep beneath the seafloor. The entrances into it there could be multiple of them, and they could be scattered around. I don't know, perhaps that you barely even notice them. and access will be controlled from within the base. Obviously, just a massive military advantage if this was really within the feasible construction technology of the time in 1966, as the Naval Research Center at China Lake is stating here in the document. And just to round this out before we kind of wrap this up and draw the conclusions here, another U.S. Navy document was also analyzed by Richard Sauter, this one going from 1972 from the U.S. Naval Facilities Engineering Command, and where they're basically proposing a submarine navy with undersea ports, undersea emplacement of key supporting elements, and Navy planners envision placing the following sorts of facilities below the surface. 1. Administration buildings. 2. Medical facilities. 3. Aircraft maintenance facilities. 4. Ammunition storage facilities. And 5. Miscellaneous storage facilities. So this, in 1972, should cause us to wonder if they were planning on building undersea facilities for aircraft maintenance and miscellaneous storage. That certainly tracks with the idea of storing top secret UFOs, reverse engineered craft, experimental craft, ARV, alien reproduction vehicles, as the latest alleged whistleblower has called them. And this to bring us back to the beginning of what we looked at in this video here. On the right there on the map, that's where the Azores Islands are, as you can see, in the middle of the ocean, not connected to any coastal area. And so, this would sort of track with the idea of having these bases out in the ocean at strategic locations. And of course, the supposed sighting of the witness from the Disclosure Project supposedly saw a Tic Tac being loaded in an aircraft out in this area. Is there a connection to the plans for the undersea facilities that we've looked at in this video from the Navy documents of 1966? And similarly, the Tic Tac that David Fravor and the others, Navy pilots and personnel, saw in 2004, and that David Fravor testified to in Congress in July of 2023. Could these be from undersea ports, perhaps off the coast of California or Catalina Island, or perhaps even connected through a series of undersea tunnels that they were scheming and drawing plans for back 60 years ago in the top research facilities of the naval construction units? Definitely food for thought, I think, before we just jump to the conclusion that it must be aliens, it must be non-human intelligence. So, in concluding here, my first bullet point, I think that we shouldn't assume that UFO sightings and undersea underground bases must be aliens or non-human intelligence. Okay? If anything, these documents we read today should really make us explore other possibilities before concluding firmly anything. Second bullet point, if the truth about the alleged alien activity is kept secret, why not secret human military operations? In other words, from my perspective, most of the UFO research field tends to assume that the cover-up's all about the fact that aliens exist, are engaging the earth, have been for a long time, and that we've recovered their craft and body and so forth. But much smaller percentage focuses on the idea that we may have successfully reverse engineered, have our own, that we have our own operations related to this activity, and that even, this could involve interaction with said non-human intelligence. And my point in the second bullet point is this logic, right? If it's easy for most UFO researchers, and then even perhaps eventually a larger amount of the public, to accept that our government for 80 years would keep secret from the public the fact that other intelligent beings exist and have been coming here for 80 years, okay, which would be a massive thing. Why would we not find it plausible that they would keep other things secret that are much more down to earth, such as that they built undersea bases, that they've been experimenting with some success potentially with these crash retrieval technologies and reverse engineering programs, and that they're using undersea bases. I mean, why would that not be secret too? And I just bring this up because, again, I'm not trying. I don't know, right? Definitely don't know what the UAP phenomena is. But I think that, to my third bullet point here, by jumping to the conclusion that it's all NHI and alien, we could skip over important truths about human developments and secret operations that could be even more important to uncover. Because, and again, I say this in most videos at some point, if there's ever any disclosure, and I guess we'll see what the signs are pointing to next week with the hearing, an easy tactic could be, I think, hypothetically, to say, yes, these things do exist. Yes, there is some kind of non-human intelligence, but we don't understand it. We've been trying to figure it out, and we just haven't made progress. It's just so mind-boggling. We don't know their intentions, and we need to keep things secret for the safety of our nation and the planet. And we could just move on. And now the only difference is people have to come to terms with, like, we're not alone. That phrase people like to throw around. Whereas, behind the scenes, there just could be a whole nother reality. Like David Grush said himself in an interview with Jeremy Corbell, he said, I blew the whistle because I don't want to live in the matrix anymore, and like David Grush was asked under oath in Congress, are there interactions and agreements between the U.S. government and non-human intelligence? And David Grush said, I can't speak to you about that in a public setting. And with Ross Coulthart, David Grush said, that's a question I hope our national leadership can get to the bottom of. So he's clearly hinting at something. Okay. That leads me to my fourth bullet point here, because I think we have to leave everything on the table and explore how deep does it go? Right. And if we don't seriously look, for example, like the research someone like Richard Sauter did that we analyzed in this video, and more people don't keep doing deeper dives and digging, that the wool could be pulled over our eyes in that way if these kinds of things are going on by human activity. And, does it go as far as a secret space program? All right. It reminds me of David Fravor's comment at the hearing where he said the Tic Tac went from 80,000 feet down to sea level in seconds or whatever. And as he said in the hearing, above 80,000 feet or 80,000 feet, whatever it was, at or above that is space. So here, again, pretty strong data point. It's under oath at Congress. David Fravor, the pilot, the commander who witnessed the Tic Tac incident in 2004, saying this vehicle went from basically space down to ocean level, and appeared that there was possibly some type of connection with going even underwater. Now, like Danny Sheehan said, apparently these have been noticed going in and out of and underwater and into these supposed bases. So if we connect all these dots, leaving open the hypothesis of a top secret human secret space program, whether it's related to the government and the military or not, or like astronaut Edgar Mitchell put it when he spoke in 2000 and gave his testimony. In his view, it was what he said was a quasi-governmental, um, group, cabal, as I believe he put it, and who he said it may have been involved with government at some point, may or may not be anymore, and that kind of jumps into like what the UFO researcher Richard Dolan has called the breakaway civilization hypothesis of imagine just a group of human beings with a lot of wealth and power, um, collaborating and basically having like a private entity that does not really fall under any national or international laws or authorities. It's an interesting hypothesis, and so this idea of the secret space program, right? Do these undersea bases have a connection to that, based on the Nimitz and the Fravor comments? And I'll wrap it up with this now on my last bullet point. All right, a lot of this video has been about, is it humans or is it aliens? Well, maybe it's both. Okay, and that brings us to different claims. For example, claims of cooperation between NHI and secret government and or military groups. And a couple of people who have stated knowledge of this, one being Hayam Eshed, who was Israel's director of space operations for 30 years. And after he retired in 2020, he wrote a book and he gave an interview to an Israeli journalist in which he stated knowledge of, as in his words, a non-human intelligence presence interacting with Earth. He even said a galactic federation, as science fiction and far-fetched as that sounds, this is coming from the 30-year space director of Israel. A galactic federation of other civilizations that the U.S. government, that there's knowledge of and interaction with. And Haim Eshed, even said that there are bases on the moon and Mars where non-human intelligence and humans are cooperating on certain programs there. So, and then you can have a more kind of grounded claim, if you want to call it that, by Dan Sherman, who I have covered his claims in his book from the late 90s, which I find like pretty, I mean, not believable in the sense that like it sounds so unbelievable, but if we come to learn that like such a presence of aliens has been here, and that there's been some type of interaction with the military and the government, then I think his story is pretty believable in the sense that like he didn't make a big career out of it, make a bunch of money, go and the way he writes the story just seems sort of very matter of factly and kind of believable. Again, it could just be made up, but I do a full assessment of that in another video you can find on my channel if you search Dan Sherman. But anyway, not to go on a tangent there, he basically just said that he worked for the Air Force and the NSA, and he was put into this special program where he went to some facility where the windows were blacked out. He thinks it was kind of underground, and this was some type of communication facility where they trained him in his ability to kind of use like psychic abilities for certain communications, and that there was like a training program going on where the alleged gray aliens were cooperating with elements of the NSA and the Air Force. So, I mean, I don't know, all to say, again, David Grush said he couldn't talk about it in public at the hearing, and he also said that he hopes that these questions can be answered. And all of this should just make us think. And we kind of went all over the place here today, but not really, because it's all connected. And you know, what's really going on here, and are we dealing with something that is strictly of an intelligence and a civilization beyond our own, or is this something from the deep black budget world of the deepest layers of top secret knowledge and operations of quasi-military and governmental groups? Did they build these undersea bases? These are all important questions, and I hope that this video will bring to light some of that here today. As we see, comments like this spreading and getting more and more people tuning in when Danny Sheehan goes on these big podcasts and says, there's undersea bases that the UFOs are coming from. Before people just jump say, wow, there's alien bases out there. Look at the documentation that we looked at, right? Should we really just believe that they're alien bases? Could they be human made? Could these be human operations that people are seeing? Could these be human operations that the submarines and the military pilots are witnessing? I think it's plausible, assuming that there's a substantial reality to all this. So that's going to be it. Thank you again for watching. Let's see what happens in the hearing next week. Supposedly there's going to be some element of USO, undersea submersible UFOs, underwater submersible objects, whatever it is. And so I'm going to keep my ears peeled for what they say about that, because I think they're going to want to cover up what's going on with the human activity. Although, like I said in a previous video, the mention of the ARV, alien reproduction vehicles, in the Michael Schellenberg article by the alleged witness whistleblower from the alleged Immaculate Constellation program, which the hearing's allegedly supposed to be touching on. Maybe not. Maybe some of this truth is going to come out about what technology we have. And I always say it's important because that's going to be the difference between a kind of watershed breakthrough moment potentially for human beings and the planet, if we can get access to these potential breakthrough technological devices that potentially have been developed already and kept secret from the world. But let's see what happens. Thank you again for watching. I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.